Jordan B. Peterson is a very smart man who says a lot of very smart things. I know some people don't like to hear that because to them anyone who disagrees with them in any single point must be a complete bumbling idiot because they are right about everything. But just objectively, Jordan B. Peterson is highly educated and highly intelligent. I do not for a second doubt that he is an absolute expert in his field of psychology and psychoanalysis. He's run a practice for many decades and it is highly successful. So there has to be something there. I mean, he's lectured on these topics for a long time. He knows a lot about them. And you know what? I also think he's a pretty decent life coach. He's not my personal life coach. I don't believe in all aspects of his philosophy, but it's certainly worth listening to, and it's addressed at a group that is relatively disenfranchised in recent times. Because yes, if you are a young white man who is not from a wealthy family, you have problems in this world. There is data to back this up. You might even say that Jordan Peterson stands on the right principles when it comes to freedom of speech, even though he is slandered for it massively in every media outlet and every fucking online social media platform all of the time. Not many people could sustain that level of harassment, and he does. Also, the fact that he does quite well out of it might help. What Jordan B. Peterson is not, however, is a man of science. He may be a psychologist, but once you get into the real hard sciences, where psychology is still considered a sort of half and half deal, he is the John Locke to Sam Harris's Jack Shepherd. That was a reference to a 14-year-old television show right there. Nobody fucking got that. All that being said, do watch it, it's very good. He recently shared this PragerU video against climate change on Twitter and said how the anti-capitalist environmentalists, they will hate this because, you know, it's all about bashing those anti-capitalist environmentalists, those fucking tree-hugging idiots. In the past and also the present and really just generally, the man has demonstrated a general lack of understanding about how climate change and climate science function. That is just in case you didn't believe it when he literally shared a PragerU video about climate change. PragerU is about as authoritative a source on climate change as Thor Bjornsson is on being Peter Dinklage. Jordan B. Peterson is also not a man of science when it comes to religion. It's not like he's like a Christian fundamentalist, but he does believe that there is strong evidence for the existence of God, and some would even say proof. One of these pieces of evidence that he cites is similarities in mythological and cultural archetypes in cultures throughout history and throughout the world, which is true. There have been a lot of archetypes and a lot of ideas and a lot of stories repeated in religious texts and oral traditions from cultures from the very early points in history in the most distant reaches of the world to the highest civilizations in the Fertile Crescent. Everywhere in the world you have had a certain similarity in what mythologies include and what they do not. Trickster gods. You have Loki, Kokopelli, Maui, Anansi, my namesake Gideon from Irish mythology. You have the meme god that is really just retrospectively hilariously named Hue Coyotl. Almost all creatures also have some sort of blood-sucking undead creature that can very frequently transform into animals and influence the mind of people. Except the Japanese. Vampires were not known in Japanese mythological tradition until they were introduced by Korean cinema in the 50s. That's a useless fact you just scrubbed a childhood memory for. And this goes on and on and on. There are parallels that have developed independently of each other in the mythology, folklore, and belief systems of these cultures that have existed interspersed through time and space on the planet Earth. That sounded a bit bigger than it actually was. If you look at the hero's journey, for instance, any heroic mythological story in any culture and mythology ever, you can somehow map onto that circle. It is almost as though humans throughout the world have very similar brains that think about the same things and are confronted with very similar problems, like do not starve, do not get fucked over, do not bleed out. But no, for Jordan B. Peterson, somehow, through sheer force of will, all of these parallels are indicative that there is something to them, and that something is somehow divine in some manner. Especially for someone who falls more into the essentialist school of thinking, this sounds a lot like all cultures get hungry, therefore God. But it's really not. It's really just because human beings are fairly similar to each other, even if we have superficial differences. I mean, the skeletal structure, of course you can look what ethnicity that was historically, but really, if you're not trained in that, you can't really see the differences in between people. They all look like skeletons to me. There were always predators lurking in the night. Death was always something that was unexplained, and people never wanted to die, and people never wanted to lose their loved ones, and people always wanted something to watch over them. We are creatures of pattern recognition, and if we recognize patterns where there are none, we will often recognize identical patterns across cultures independently of each other, because we have the same fucking brains! But that's not the big one. That's not the big evidence of the existence of God that Jordan Peterson has. That's just an ancillary thing. No, the real proof in the pudding is the religious experience. And I do put this in quotation marks, but religious experiences are 100% real. They do happen. People have religious experiences all the time. They're a highly interesting psychological phenomenon associated with the massive oxytocin release, an almost orgasmic oxytocin release, right? They have great euphoria, mass hallucinations of groups of people who will suddenly believe to have seen the same thing even though they have really not. People can just feel connected to each other and to some sort of divine spirit. But it's all in your head. And this using religious experiences as proof for a religion is something that religions have done for thousands of years. But the thing is, religious experiences aren't limited to religion. In art, people have religious experiences all the time. Have you ever been to like a really good concert where there's the band is just, there's this energy coming from the band and the energy coming from the crowd, it's right back, and you roll in it together and you're just afloat in the music. This can happen to you in clubs, especially when you're on some sort of drugs. Drugs tend to help with the religious experiences. But it's not a drug thing exclusively also. You can 100% have religious experiences, which many people like myself prefer to call spiritual experiences, in almost any context.
You want something? Take it! That's yours tonight. You want it? You want it? Take it! You want it tonight? Take it!
I mean, die-hard atheists have religious experiences all the time. But for Peterson, this unexplained neurological and psychological phenomenon is somehow evidence of God because of reasons. Just ask anyone who has come to believe through religious experience. They will attest to God being real, because that is not at all a biased sample. I mean, that's like someone who shrooms all the time telling you about the spirits that exist on the other side and communicate with them. Of course they would believe it. In our scientific, rationalistic and objectivist Western age, a lot of people feel a lack of religious experience in their life. They want religion to be real, but they cannot bring themselves to believe it fully because science says no. And this is where Jordan Peterson comes in. Coasting on his legitimate credentials as a renowned psychologist, he goes into the lives of gullible people and reaffirms their beliefs with unexplained phenomena. That is 100% a God of the Gaps argument. Oxytocin real, therefore God, lol. And I do get his argument that God is a real person for people who believe in God. And those people often do good things because they believe in God. But I find that is a very weak point to stand on, because the very same people, if that God told them to do bad things, would also do bad things. God is not a fictitious force like spin gravity, which is real enough to be called gravity without actually being, technically speaking, gravity. If people believe in God and he is real in their heads, he is still not objectively real, he is still only real inside of their heads. Whereas spin gravity, if you believe in it or not, is going to press you down on the inside of the cylinder. But yeah, essentially, the whole religious experience are a thing that people have to bring them together and closer to God, and all the parallels and the mythologies that help us be good people and help us survive in the world. Therefore, God, that's really the same thing as the hand banana argument that has been debunked time and time again, only it's been repackaged as something that is smart and intellectual.
Behold the atheist's nightmare.
It's really just reframing of the evidence. At the end of the day, it's all the same juju, and it's all the same shit that isn't true. Thank you very much for watching this video. Do all the video things with the like and the subscribe and the commentario. Come on my Discord server, we have very fun conversations there, and also we have some not so fun conversations there. That also happens, but it's mostly fun conversations. Follow me on Twitch, I will be streaming later tonight. I'm not quite sure what game yet. 90% it's not going to be No Man's Sky. In that spirit, don't fall for old arguments repackaged as smart. Live free. I like all of you. And see you around, cunts.